Let me go see this one.
Brooke, I might suggest,
Yes.
I don't know if Casey has access to the presentation. And I don't know, you want to just hang tight until the sheriff is available? That's a 10-minute presentation. That might give her some time and I can do our opening. And then Casey, are you able to play the presentation? Is that possible?
I'm actually with the sheriff too, so
Oh.
I'm walking up. We're walking up to our office right now.
Oh,
Pull it up.
okay, good.
In about
Oh.
3 minutes.
Oh, cool. Well, perfect.
Okay.
Good. We can live with
Well,
it.
in the meantime, if you're not already on our mailing list, and we don't shower you with millions of emails or anything, we mostly it's the link to the meeting coming up. There might be sometimes there's a midweek email talking about the various things going on in the city that we feel are really important and are aligned with our mission. So please put your name in, private message me, Brooke Randolph, and I will be glad to get you on the mailing list. Thank you. The waiting.
Okay. Well, if they're 2 minutes away, maybe I'll start the presentation and to let everybody know that we're here this evening to meet with Sheriff Hutson, who's slightly delayed, and some of her staff to talk about the Orleans Justice Center, aka Orleans Parish Prison. Orleans Parish Prison has been under federal supervision since 1969. Back then, inmates filed suit against then Sheriff Charlie Fody for inhumane and unconstitutional conditions at the jail. It was a horrific place back then, ladies and gentlemen, if you are unaware. It was terrible. And I mean, it was, I'm sorry, I'll continue. In 2013, under then Sheriff Marlon Guzman, a federal consent decree took over Orleans Parish Prison once again to address jail conditions and overcrowding. Sheriff Hutson ran for and won election on a reform platform to bring progressive changes to the jail. And so we asked her to start this evening's forum with a presentation on the successes and changes and challenges of her first year. And I think the sheriff is just joining us right now. And so great timing as usual, Sheriff Hutson. Well, thank you for coming and sharing with us. Look at it. Beautiful smiley face right there with us. And so we want to thank you. I know you have a busy day. You were meeting with the federal representatives about the consent decree, I guess. And thank you for joining us. I do want to say, take a little moderator privilege here and say, I really think this is what living in a city is about. When elected officials like yourself make themselves available and accountable to the public, and that we have an informed and interested public who interacts with you. And so I just want to thank everybody for taking the time. Everybody could be doing something else today, but taking the time to sit in on this important forum. So thank you, Sheriff Hutson. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Jeff. And thank you to you all. I look on here and I see a lot of people who, are invested in change at this jail. And I thank you for being involved in Justice and Beyond, which has been huge since its inception. I saw the power of your work, and so I am honored to be here. It's been too long since I've been here, and I hope to be back, more often. But I'm joined here today. You met Gina Curley, who got it all kicked off for us. But I'm joined here today by Dr. Astrid Birgden, who is our warden of the Orleans Justice Center. And so the main jail, the temporary detention center, and also the temporary medical hospital. And then always in the back is Casey Mcgee, our Chief Communications Officer. So she is, assisting us in putting the PowerPoint together, which Dr. Birgden is going to go through as we talk about what we're trying to do. We changed our mission, our vision, and our values to reflect the change that we want to see in the jail. We want it to be humane treatment, humanly centered, respectful, and we want to work together and led by community to get this change going. We know that, and I see Arissa up in the corner there, I know that we've been fighting systemic injustice for a long time, teaching about it, talking about it, and we are incorporating that into our work as well. So looking at inequitable systems, mass incarceration, all that, and trying to do something better for our city. So that's a big part of our change, but one of the biggest parts was just changing the way we run this jail. Dr. Birgden, and you'll get, if you haven't heard her accent before, you'll hear it and you'll be able to guess which ward you think she's from. But she is a clinical psychologist, and that's why she's here, because we are the largest provider of mental health in the city and one of the largest providers in the whole state, probably second or third. So that's what we do all day. That's a big part of us being guardians in this system. And we want to talk about what we're doing to be more humane, more therapeutic, and all that good stuff. So I guess we, before we get started on the presentation, any questions, any comments, Casey or Ashley? Anything y'all want to say? What'd you say?
No, I think we're just ready for your presentation. If you guys, do you have the ability to share your screen now?
No, I don't.
Brooke, can you make sure the sheriff can do that?
And do I have that?
Should be like a share, the host should be able to share the presentation thing.
Do you from off my computer the presentation, or who's it? Oh, okay, already up.
Yeah, so whoever's the host is needs to share.
Okay, can y'all see it?
Not yet, no.
Okay, let's see. I'm trying to share.
If you hit that start share green button in the middle.
Okay, yes, I can do it now. Okay.
Okay.
And, okay. And share.
Awesome. There you go.
All right. Beginning. Okay. So, as we discussed, we're trying to really just change the way we do business. We want to transform the culture of the jail from one of punitive thought process to one of guardians and caretakers. Sometimes we have to be warriors, but most of the time we're guardians and caretakers. So we're trying to change that. We're all in for rehabilitating. We're trying to do something better. We get to see the young folks going to school, but we want more of that for those who are not so young as well, and something for them to do. As we open back up from COVID, we are connecting with our community to help get that done. Now, okay. We were, as I think Gina told you earlier, we were at federal court looking at compliance with the consent judgment, the status. All of that is very much dependent on staffing, but this is what I was just talking about, our new values, mission, and vision, which we are emphasizing being not just constitutional, but humane, responsive, community-led, restorative. All those things that we think are important. So we have to transform our culture from the inside out, and we have to recruit and train talent that will foster what we're trying to do. Here's our new mission statement, and we're glad to share that with anybody who needs it. But again, it talks about what it is we're trying to do. I'm going to put this in every presentation we do going forward, just so it will be at the forefront of people's mindset, and people will always know why I'm doing what I'm doing and why we're doing what we're doing, because we're trying to do better. And again, our values, talked about community leadership, humanity, big parts of that. Okay, so we wanted to kind of talk about what we've been trying to do over this first year. And it's been a lot. It's been a lot more. We started the year out, trying to assess, to learn, because remember, we did not get a full transition. So we were trying to learn what's going on, and then assess, and then plan. So in year two, it's all about, and that was the first year. So in year two, it's all about impact, putting where the rubber meets the road, trying to get things done. So our first year highlights, though, we want to talk about We had to rebuild our training academy to have a more professional learning environment and to operationalize the consent judgment. You want to talk about that a little bit, Dr. Birgden?
No, that's okay. I'll just start with the program logic.
Okay. Yeah, so we had to actually, well, I'll take that up then. We had to teach about the consent judgment, which is a huge document, a lot of detail. And if you know anything about our new generation, our younger generations, they want to know why. And so we have to operationalize that for them and let them know why we're doing the things that we're doing, and what it means for them, and how to have a safe and constitutional jail. So we've had a number of highlights. So the academy is huge. We're going to do a citizens academy coming up forward. The DEA asked us, came and said they would help us put it together. It's not going to be DEA centered, just will help us put the structure together so we can talk about kind of the history of the jail from Fody to Gusman to me and the changes we want to make. But it's been around 186 years, so there's been a whole lot of history there. So we had one of our instructors become the first female firearms instructor in this agency's 186-year history. You have a new sheriff, first female sheriff. We're making first. And as we are over 70% of the employees at the jail are women, we have to make sure that our leadership looks like that as well. So we're prioritizing that. We had 144 staff members receive mental health first aid, and soon we'll have crisis intervention training here as well through the National Institute of Corrections. They are also going to come back sometime in the fall and teach us about strategic inmate management, which is all about meeting the needs of our residents so that we don't have as much violence, we don't have as much suicide, all those types of things going on. So we went recently to Texas to a jail that really does that well and learned a number of things. And we look forward to getting that being taught here as well. So we're upping the training because that's getting it, complying with the consent decree is all about training. Despite that, the jail being our biggest job, we also make time for our community. So you can see there's a number of things that we do to allow people to parade or including Mardi Gras. We helped make sure it could return to its full route, to making sure that, events, community events, wellness events, all kinds of events go on. And we support all that in our community as well. And then something that's not as sexy, but it's kind of boring, is we want OPSO to be a well-run institution. So when we got into office, we were behind 2 years on state-required audits that we turned into the legislative auditor, and that was 2020 and 2021 financial audits. First thing we did was complete the 2020 audit, and now we are working on the 2021, and we will be complete with that soon. And then we're going to stay up to date, get up to date for 2022, and stay on track. So we're making sure that our community knows that we are being responsible with our finances as well. Talking about the jail population a little bit, I'm going to turn that over to Dr. Birgden. Can you see it all from here?
Okay. So as you can see, we've got a very high mental health caseload. So at any time, half the residents are receiving psychotropic medication. And so we have acute medical and a subacute medical caseload as well. And then there's a step-down service. And another thing to highlight is how many people return to our custody, so 82%. And so for those of you who are focused on re-entry, I think the aim for all of us is to reduce that re-incarceration rate of people being rearrested. And then you can see that 2/3 of our residents are in on violence charges and not so many on drug charges. So I think historically, a lot of people came in on drug charges, and that's being altered. Now that's being shifted. And when the new administration came in a year ago, as soon as somebody is sentenced, we move them as fast as we can over to Department of Corrections rather than holding them with us at the jail. So every 2 weeks, a busload of people is being taken to the prison system. And just in terms of length of stay, we've got people who've been here up to 8 years. So a lot of the programming, usually with a pre-trial jail, you wouldn't focus too much on offence-related program, but we've got people here for such a long period of time that we think that we need to be doing that more so than you would at other pre-trial jails. Did you want to talk about the challenges with the funding?
Yeah, we're gonna tag team it.
Yeah.
Okay. We're gonna get close together. You know, we lost in the millage. It was a bad fail. So we're gonna have to come back and really educate the community about why this is so important. Funding is the key to fixing everything. Now, the way that the history of the jail over the last 2 sheriffs has been an issue with how we funded it, which is all fines, fees, and, you know, per resident. And so we've changed that now. And as Dr. Birgden talked about, we don't have so many drug-related offenses, misdemeanors, traffic fees, traffic infractions. We don't keep people for that stuff anymore. The city council has worked on that along with this community to bring those numbers down. But we have not fixed some serious issues with the jail itself. And this jail has only been open since 2015, but it was built in such a way that it was dangerous to our residents and certainly to our staff. So there are just unnecessary metal and implements that they can get a hold of to create weapons to hurt each other. And there's ways that they can hurt themselves as well. And so, and certainly not enough suicide-proof cells to really deal with that issue. So that's huge for us. That's a big issue when we are only at a little over 55% staffing. That's a huge issue for us, being able to also battle the design elements with the jail. We asked that when I told you we assessed last year and we planned to fix these things, which cost money. So we asked the city council for money. We didn't get all that yet, but we're working with them with the ARPA funds to try and fix the building and the IT infrastructure. If anybody knows anything about the city council's dashboards, the DA's dashboards, all that, a lot of them start with our data here at the jail. In fact, most of the criminal justice system, the NLPD has some and we have some of the most critical data, but it's sitting on a system that is from the 80s. Black screen, green prompt. It's called the AS400. That even sounds like something from the 80s, doesn't it? So we have to get rid of that old system. It is in danger every week of overheating and falling down. And when it goes down, not only does the jail, but the criminal courts and the clerk's office. So these are critical changes that have to be made. It's also a tough to use system. We were just in court talking to the court about how we're complying. You have to also prove you're complying, and you prove you're complying with data and entering information into systems. These systems are so hard to use and archaic, and with short staffing, it's almost impossible to do. We want technology that's about this size that you can just take and bloop, bloop, write reports, make it easy for this generation. This is all they know anyway. So we really think we want to make it easier for them. We got a little raise last year, which was huge. We have bigger classes because of that, but we have to have a pay plan for people to stay. And so to treat them well, we've lost a lot of really experienced individuals. We've got to have a pay plan to do that. So we're going to bring the millage back. We'll do that sometime next year. But we're going to educate our community about it all along the way. And then I talked about training being the key to consent judgment. We're working on that. But that second to last bullet point, to get out on Mardi Gras routes, we had to get body-worn cameras for everybody, ballistic vests, make sure everybody had radios, all these things that our team did not have. By the way, in the jail, they didn't have radios before we got here. We had to make that change to make sure they had radios. And then we need a mobile command unit, which is a Winnebago that we have right now. That might be from the 80s too. I don't know how old that is. But a command center is not a booking bus. It is actually a command center for all of our operations should there be another catastrophe. So that's something that's critical, the continuation of operations. Okay, I'm gonna turn it back to Dr.
Okay, so I was just going to explain what we're doing because I saw you were interested in the OJC. So when I first arrived, there were so many overwhelming problems. I just didn't know where to start. So I thought I will create a service logic model. So this is what sort of directs the traffic on how to manage stuff. So there's inputs on what we need. There's outputs, which are who the participants are in the activities. There's the short and medium and long-term outcomes. So I figured that our goal was to create a safe, secure and humane jail. One way was to decrease interpersonal violence. A second way was to improve staff and resident wellbeing. And the third way was to reduce the resident rearrest rates, because I saw how high percentage of people that return to us. So this is where we would really rely on re-entry support to reduce that. So the inputs are that all staff are appropriately recruited, trained and supervised. So an example is we've just piloted experiential training to new recruits, that we had culture bearers who represent the city talking about the impact of incarceration and what your role will be when you step into that jail that you're about to commence in. We wanted to improve the staff resident ratio by increasing the recruitment of staff and then retaining staff when we got them. So that's a priority, and that's to support direct supervision properly, because there should always be staff in the pods at all times. And there was no case management system here. So we're in the process of designing that so we can operationalise direct supervision and strategic inmate management. So we've got 8 case managers now, and we're in the process of developing that. And meanwhile, we're developing partnerships for what I call pre-entry and re-entry, because we're responsible for delivering programs in the jail as well as doing warm handoffs to outside agencies as people exit. So these are some of the groups that we're working with, and but there's many more. So we're setting up a spreadsheet because we've got lots of people approaching us. So some people are working with us voluntarily, some people are funded elsewhere to deliver programs, other people are looking for funding. So we're setting up a spreadsheet so we can keep track of all the different programs. But for example, One Book, One New Orleans, that's because I was at a music festival and somebody introduced me to the CEO of that organisation. So a lot of it's through word of mouth as well. And through COVID, there were a lot of people prior to COVID delivering services here, but then COVID came and snatched them all away. So we're trying to get them back. And the Crime Victim Reparations Unit, so they were awarded funds to help victims of crime. And so they're busy, so they work within the OPSO, but I thought that you're particularly interested in restorative justice initiatives and in terms of the role of the OPSO in that space. The participants are our residents, the staff who are both custodial and civilian, and then the stakeholders that I divide into pre-entry, entry and re-entry program partners. Then the activities, I've just given some examples. So when I came here, there were so many grievances, I just didn't know what to do with it. So I started every 2 weeks, I meet with representatives of the pods. So there's 4 meetings, like 4 groups that meet with me, and we go over their grievances, and they're examples of mainly what they talk about. We improved the menu in January this year, and we did a survey of how, because food is just so important when you're trapped in a space. We've halved the grievances. We compared 2022 to 2023. So we've halved the grievances, and use of force by staff is down as well. With the case managers, we included lived experience peer supporters who come through Metropolitan Human Services and a deputy. We've trained them in grievance mediation. So if a resident complains about a staff member, there's a resident-on-resident conflict, or the staff have a conflict, we have now got mediation set up. So we've already started getting referrals in. That started about 2 weeks ago. So to me, that's the beginning of a restorative justice approach, because this is not restorative mediation yet, but the culture shift is very slow. So I'm just getting people used to the idea of mediating when there's conflict. Travis Hill used RJ in the classroom. So we're trying to move all the students into the same pod so they can do restorative justice circles within their living environment. We'll trial that, and then we'll start looking at expanding it through the jail. So hooking onto that current mediation process. And meanwhile, the case managers will start assessing needs, developing a case plan for higher need residents, and then deliver pre-entry programs and liaise with numerous re-entry organisations for a smooth transition out. So I'm hoping, I define interpersonal violence as resident-on-resident violence, resident-on-staff, and staff use of force. We're hoping we'll have decreased incidents there, and increased wellbeing of staff and residents around physical, social and psychological wellbeing. So it's still working on those kind of measures. And then a third measure would be the reduced resident rearrest rates. We've got less people returning back to us. And I'm hoping that will create a safe, secure and humane jail. So that logic model is a diagram. I just thought it's a bit overwhelming if you just slap the picture up of it. And that's it. Did you want to swap chairs?
Yeah, swap. I'm not in the Paris chair. Okay. Stop share. Boy, I'm getting good at this.
That's right.
Hope you enjoyed that, and of course, we would love to answer any questions.
Yeah, it was a phenomenal presentation, and I have to say that a lot of the questions you guys have touched on, but these questions are specific, so I think it's an opportunity for you to maybe delve deeper into the topics as they come up, especially restorative justice and that kind of stuff. But the first question is, the Bureau of Governmental Research wrote an op-ed piece in The Advocate last week that what is needed to strengthen the relationship between the Sheriff's Office and the City Council is good communication. Do you have plans to improve communication between your office and the City Council?
We've been trying to do that since we got in here. It started when we first got into office. We had 2 deaths in June. That was a huge traumatic event for the entire staff, those 2 deaths. And so we started talking to the City Council and the federal court about the issues with this jail that helped to cause those 2 deaths. And they were, again, the ability to break off parts of the jail to make weapons and the ability for residents to jump to their death, because those could be fixed with, we said around 3.5 million would have helped fix a lot of those issues. So we started right then and there. We rolled into budget time. We spent in our office around 1,000 man and women power hours putting that together, because we had to delve into where is everything, well, the money been going, where is all this? What have we been doing? We had to go back and look at all this to start getting ready for this budget presentation and to cost out what it would cost to fix the jail, train people, get new equipment, all these things. About 1,000 hours. And we went to City Council, we presented all that. But we have been taught, we have a budget working group with them as well. And that meets quarterly as well. So we've been telling them that as well. In addition, the budget working group, which is behind the scenes, we have the Criminal Justice Committee we talked at, the budget hearings we talked at, and Criminal Justice budget hearings. Yeah, so those are the 2 that main that we go, and regular City Council whenever we get called there. So we've been talking a lot and presenting a lot of information, and we're going to keep doing that collaboratively, because if we don't get a pay plan and keep our deputies, the city will continue to pay for that with lawsuits, consent decree costs, because we're not going to be able to get out of it until we stabilize our workforce. But we do intend to continue to share as much information as possible.
That sounds good. So hopefully communication, I've seen you there. I've seen you at those meetings, and maybe they need to listen more. So whatever we have to do, let's get it done, because it's important for all of us, right? So the next question, Dr. Birgden talked a lot about different policies and programs and practices that you guys have put in place in the last year. Can you highlight what do you think are the most important of those policies, programs and practices that you've put in place?
For me, it's addressing the grievances. I think has probably been the most important thing. I call it the 3 V's. You need voice, validation, and you'll get voluntariness. So if people are given voice and you validate what they're saying, they might not agree with the outcome, but as long as they think the process is fair, then it's more likely to result in compliance. Because at the end of the day, you're trying to work, you're living in a huge share house where you're hoping everyone just gets on with each other. And so I think it was giving voice to the grievances, which has assisted. But that's just the first step in the process. We want to do training in conflict resolution amongst the residents. Interpersonal violence is a very big issue for us. I mean, people constantly making shanks out of the building. So that will be the next step, is how to reduce the interpersonal violence.
And so the next question is also for you, Dr. Birgden. Restorative approaches. Can you talk about a little bit more about that? I know you talked some.
Yeah, so I think with the grievances, because it's so radical that a resident can complain about a staff member and they will have a mediation, that I kept it at the most conservative version of mediation to commence with. So it doesn't involve reparation of harm. There might be a plan between the two of them of how to move forward. So I think that will be the next phase. I mean, I know about 5 years ago, I reviewed a book on restorative justice in prisons, and I just can't find it anymore. It was set up like a theatre piece, and I read the whole book, gave them feedback, and I was thinking I've got to try and find that book again to look at the steps that they were planning in rolling out restorative justice. I'm also at an international conference in Sydney in June, where I have booked myself into a workshop, which is a Centre for Innovation in the US, is presenting on how they've set up a restorative prison. But I think it's still slow work. First, we've got to get the staff and the residents speaking to each other, and then we can start pushing forward. And that's why I wanted to use Travis Hill School as the springboard, because at the moment I have the regular resident meetings about their grievances, and now we're trying to work out, how to move forward to solve the problems. Because a lot of it is interpersonal issues with the staff.
Okay, so do you think restorative approaches would have been helpful in handling the chaos, that widely reported chaos that was happening with the administration? I think that's a sheriff question.
Yeah, could you say that again?
Yeah. Do you think that some restorative approaches would have been helpful in handling the widely reported chaos in your administration this past year?
Yeah, first I want to push back on that word chaos. We are dealing with 1,000 people. This is 200 or so more than my predecessor had the last couple of years. And at staffing being greatly reduced. And we have been pushing forward with big changes, safety, speaking to residents, and bringing out grievances, all these things that we've been doing. There's no chaos going on. There are 24 pods over here and 1,000 people, and we manage those. We, even during that unrest back in September of last year, we just managed the process. We managed it, spoke to them, stayed in contact with them, and then had to go and manage that issue. But we were talking to them the entire time and giving them voice, so that we were trying to manage how much force that we had to use. So what we do on a daily basis, our number one priority is saving lives. That's what we did. That's our number one priority every day. That's not chaos. We have employees coming to work and saving lives, whether it's on the medical side or whether it's on the security side, our deputies. During Easter weekend, we had 2 people wanting to try to commit suicide and another 5 or so saying they were going to do it. And we don't have enough suicide-proof cells. We don't have enough deputies, all these things going on. We are managing a really challenging environment, and it is not chaotic. Now, we've had some change in our upper level management. I dare you to find any organization in which there's not been change. There's a human resources department, there's grievance departments, all these things in every organization. I was an employment lawyer before I started monitoring. This is normal that you have to manage people, not chaos, not chaos.
Okay, so let's move on to reentry. What are you guys doing to prepare inmates for reentry?
So what I found when I came here was, because of COVID, a lot of programs that had existed were no longer available. So at the moment, we are trying to bring all the programs back into the jail. It's very difficult because of the low staffing, because anyone who comes in from outside to deliver programs, we have to make sure that they are supervised and safe, that there's a staff member available to do that. We have had Arch come in and do spoken word with the women. NA and AA are here regularly. There's chaplains, but we want to get more offence-related programs in place, like anger management, the Men Have Asked for Family Violence programs, parenting. So because people are not yet convicted, we can't do offence-specific programs like sex offending, violent offending, because it would be at risk providing information before they've even got to their trial. But we can do offence-related programs. And at the moment, we're looking at grants in order to fund those programs. And I sit on about 3 policy committees. So I interact with other agencies, not-for-profits, who are providing re-entry. But we're certainly open to partnering with agencies. A prison should not be a closed system. So it should be open to external scrutiny. So I welcome re-entry engagement.
And we got the funding from Congressman Troy Carter to do reentry work from the jail. So we're very excited about that. We have a day reporting center that works with the state for people coming home from the penitentiary. And so now we want to do something similar. They provide all kinds of services, and we want to do something similar from the jail side. But when we're going to hire our community engagement person who will help us with that, help Dr. Birgden to do that warm handoff. So there's more to come, but as soon as we get that person hired, we'll be able to start moving forward.
Sounds good. Now, I was shocked, Dr. Birgden, when I heard you say half of the population is on psychotropic, did I say right, meds? So these are people who have severe mental illness who take that. Am I accurate? Is that accurate? So half of the people who are part of the population have to take this medication. What are you guys doing besides medicating them to help treat their mental illness issues?
So WellPath has 3 psychiatrists. So just to give you an example, a couple of weeks ago, we had the 3 psychiatrists in who had 50 appointments between them. So they're very actively going around and meeting regularly with all the patients. But there's also WellPath have a multidisciplinary team made up of mental health professionals and nurses. So they're delivering group programs as well. So mainly down the road at the temporary mental health unit, the TDC. So it's called the Temporary Detention Centre, but that's where the mental health unit sits for both males and females. So they do programming down there, and to a lesser extent in the jail. We've got the pod 2A is our acute mental health clients, and then they step down into 2B, which is more free. They're safer to be out in the pod while they're waiting to go down to the mental health centre down the road. But certainly a jail should not be a pseudo-psychiatric hospital.
And that's what I was going to ask. Are you guys, I remember, I guess maybe 16 years ago or so, Bobby Jindal severely cut mental health in the city of New Orleans, closed down facilities. And it seems that now you guys are the de facto mental health hospital in the city of New Orleans. Do you have some breakdown as to the number of your population who are in jail simply because they're mentally ill, or are they also, have they committed a crime and just happen to also be mentally ill? Can you break that down for us a little more?
Yeah, I mean, it's between 50 and 65 total folks at any given time. And usually they're doing something that is has to do with their mental health diagnosis, like people who are specifically, their symptoms are being violent and doing because they're paranoid or whatnot. And then others who do things like trying to survive, and that may steal and whatnot, that may other things that may end up getting them in touch with law enforcement and then into our system. So yeah, so those are, but it's basically because of their mental health status. And we would love, sorry.
I was gonna say, so what can you do if you're treating somebody with mental health medication while they're there, and then their term is up? You can't continue to dispense medication. What can you do can you do anything for somebody in that situation? What happens?
Well, part of the warm handoff is, and we've been working with Voice of the Experience, and they've gotten us in touch with Dr. Anjali Niogi, who has the formerly incarcerated transitions clinic, to give us an idea of what you need to do to help people transition. People get into the jail because they are not taking their medications. They're dealing with addiction and not taking, whatever treatment you need to detox. And that's when they get to us. And usually, by the way, they're also very medically ill as well because of the effects of drugs or whatever their addiction is, or living on the streets. So it's a medical and mental health just really situation for us every time they get here. And so we don't want them to leave and take care of those issues. We want them to go somewhere. So that's all part of our reentry work that we want to do. We're working with the city to help them get a grant as well. And then we're working with this the formerly incarcerated transitions clinic as well. We help them get a grant. There are two, is it social
The navigators.
Navigators.
Yeah, the WellPath navigators, because we're very conscious of the interface between drug and alcohol use and mental health issues and offending, you know, the triangle. And so we're looking closely at opioid drug use as well with the formerly incarcerated clinic.
And we'd like to get them started in the jail on medically assisted detox. WellPath, our mental and medical health provider, is supposed to provide that as a part of their contract, and we're trying to get that moving. That's something that we've been talking to them about for a while. They're short on staffing too, but that is the key really to managing some behavior in here and helping people when they leave.
Let me ask you a little bit about that contract with WellPath. It's based upon how they interact with a member of the population, one of your residents, as you call them. So how do you manage that contract? If you don't know who's coming in tomorrow, if they're going to need those WellPath services or not, is there some cap, or is it just an open-ended contract that could grow and balloon if all of a sudden, you know, you get 50 mentally ill residents at your doorstep?
Yeah, I don't believe there's a cap on numbers, but I think there's language about being able to come back and talk to the city, because the contract is paid for by the city and they manage it. So we don't really manage that contract. So like, for instance, you know, trying to get nurses right now is really difficult. So maybe they need to offer some more salary to get people in here. So they may need to come back and talk to the city about that. So but they're supposed to treat whomever we have there. But that is the process to make sure they do it. So for instance, detox, medically assisted detox, they want to start only with those who come in on medication, which is very few. We want them to treat everybody who needs, you know, has a substance abuse disorder or some type of addiction. So it's a negotiation process and yeah, manage.
So, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I know we have short time. I have maybe 3 or 4 more questions. I want to get through them. How are you approaching this federal mandate to build and operate facilities for inmates with mental health and physical health issues? Is that going to be pushed off to the WellPath contract, or is that something you have to deal with in an internal budget, as an internal budget item?
Yeah, if phase 3 is built, and I'm gonna stop calling it phase 3, it's a mental health jail. If the mental health jail is built, WellPath will have to staff it. And we are already short-staffed with this facility. So that is going to be a challenge, a huge challenge. At the status conference today, WellPath talked about the inability to get registered nurses in, which is huge to giving good care. That's a shortage all over the country. So especially it's going to be a shortage in jail. So that's going to be very tough. That's going to be very tough to do. And we don't have the staff to manage the buildings that we have right now. So we really would love, and we want our community to take up this call. You talked about Bobby Jindal decimating the mental health facilities. We need a hospital back. If we had, for instance, a hospital where a couple of or some number of beds are for our 50 to 65 really acute residents, that would be phenomenal health, medical and mental health care for them instead of jail care. So we want them to go to that, and we'll provide the security, but we can't run a mental health hospital. A mental health can't do it.
So you're on record being firmly and 100% against phase 3. How does that jive with this federal mandate that you have to provide mental health? Has your position changed at all? What do you feel about this phase 3 in mental health? You just said you can't be a mental health hospital. What do we do?
Well, we need our community definitely to step up and be heard about that. But there's a legal process going on right now. I am in the process of talking to you know, our legal counsel and reviewing options. The mental health jail is an option, but it's the worst option. The best option would be a hospital. And if we could come together, and that's not something I can build alone. I need the city, we need our legislatures, we need our community involved in making sure that we have that available. That would be the best. Second best, go ahead.
So do you envision some hospital that you provide maybe security for, and what does that look like, what you just described?
A hospital that is not that's not run by the sheriff, right? Okay. But we have we have 50 to 65 beds that we need our acute and subacute to be in. And if we will provide the deputies to be security for that. But we want all the care to be provided by mental health providers and doctors and people who do that for a living. I don't think it should be a surprise to you to know that care in a jail is not the same as the care you and I get outside. And we want the care that meets the standard.
And I cut you off. I'm sorry, you were saying something else about the facility. You want to continue?
Yeah, that's the ideal one. We need that anyways. All you got to do is drive up and down Broad or under Claiborne or go to Chapatulas. Our community is in need. And we know children are traumatized by the violence that they see. Dr. Shervington and the Women in Ethnic Studies talked about that at council. But we've done nothing to put together permanent facilities to take care of this. They've done it, I think, in Miami. They've done it in Tucson. We can do it here if we can get our communities and government and private businesses to rally around this issue.
How are inmates, residents housed? If they have, do you have a wing for people who suffer from mental illness and another wing for people who don't? Are people mixed together? How does that look?
So we've got 2 pods. So 2A is the acute mental health pod, so it might have up to 60 people in it. And then 2B is the step down unit, so that once they're stabilized, they move into 2B. But 2A is often full because if someone threatens to commit suicide, they need to move to 2A. And sometimes it's behavioral issues that they want to get off a general population pod, so it becomes very complicated. And then
Dr. Birgden, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I just think for clarity purpose, how many people are in 2A? How many?
2A can hold up to 30 people because it's single cells. So we don't have people sharing. And then 2B is the step down unit. And at any time that might have about 15 to 20 people in it.
But now, so then how, if you got 900 people in jail and half on medication, how are you dealing with the other 850 people?
They are amongst the general population pods and they receive medication 2 or 3 times a day so that the nursing staff are going through every pod. Because the acute ones, I think it was in the PowerPoint before, that they might be about 30 people in that acute that were down at TMH, so that half the population on some form of psychotropic medication, but the numbers, the actual acute numbers are a lot lower. Yeah, that one. So okay. Mental health caseload all up is 534, but the acute caseload 22 and the subacute 29 and the step down is 30.
Okay, so the others, I listen, I'm no psychiatrist, I know nothing, I'm not even a doctor. I don't want to play one on this Zoom meeting, but there are different levels of psychotropic medications. Somebody might be severely mentally ill, another person may need Xanax or something just for anxiety, and so all of these people are who you're talking about. Is that?
Some will be on antidepressants, and okay. So it would be the acutely psychotic people that would be in 2A and then 2B.
Okay, and so the
transfer to the forensic facility in Jackson for competence assessment.
Got it. Okay, I got a couple more questions. Given your need for additional funding, what would you like the public to know about how you want to use it? Now, and I'll say this, Sheriff, when I interviewed you, I'm so happy to see you on this Zoom because I remember you saying that some of your computers were so old they couldn't even go on Zoom. So How are you? I'm just throwing that in. What do you want the public to know about how you're going to use all of this money that you need?
Yeah, I just want to go back and say we learned, assessed, and planned. And that plan includes fixing the broken facilities that allow residents to hurt each other and hurt our staff or to harm themselves. We need to deal with this IT system to hold data that you need to hold us accountable. The courts need to hold us accountable. So that system is key to proving that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. We've got to invest in our employees, because if we do not, I mean, everything that we do revolves around deputies, and we do not have enough of them. So we've got to do better to stabilize that. And then number 4, we have to have our community do the reentry work. We want to hire a community to take care, make sure folks are getting their needs, whether it's education, training, safe housing, all those things. We want reentry to be community led. So those are the 4 things we want to spend it on. And we put details out there when we were running through the millage, but we'll put them out there again as we go on this year-long education campaign for our community. It's all about rehabilitation. It's all about a safe jail. It's all about restorative practices.
One other question, and it was a campaign promise of yours. I don't know that you can fill it though, but it says, what conversations are you having regarding the high cost of inmate phone calls? Yeah,
we are, well, first of all, the current system we're trying to, which we have Securus is our provider. We just finished an RFP. So we are trying to work with our vendors to find out what's the true cost of phone calls. So let me give you an example. When we asked our Securus and other vendors, what does it cost to say provide, maybe we do 100,000 phone calls a year. What are the true costs of that? They couldn't give it to us because their pricing is all a part of residents paying all the bills. So I said, no, we don't want them to pay. If I just pay, what does that cost? We couldn't get that. That's why we had to go through this whole RFP process and get in requests for proposals, get people to give us the information. So we're trying to get the true cost. What does that really cost? What can they do for us? And I have not met with Devontae
Lewis,
public
service commissioner.
Yeah, but I'm excited about all he's talking about. I know he's had some hearings, but we are, as we try to move to tablet now, which will be the next issue, because we want to use it now. It's going to be internet, going to be the issue. We want to move to tablets to allow people to talk to their lawyers. I see the public defender here, to see doctors for minor care, talk to their families, stay in touch with them, which we know helps with behavior and recidivism. So we're trying to move off of phones because most of the phones they don't work all the time anyway. We got a bunch of equipment that doesn't work very well, that we've been kind of stuck with. So we're trying to move away from phone calls into more tablet-based video calls.
So then you'd be doing stuff on the internet. You won't even need phone lines primarily anymore, is what that sounds like. That's awesome.
Right. That won't be the primary.
Yeah, there are a couple of questions we're going to go back that are in the chat. One that strikes me is, when we were talking about communication with the city council, what do you view are the barrier issues to improving communication with the city council?
I think we need to try and have some more one-on-one meetings. When people are up on the dais, it's a little more difficult to have just a good conversation. And so I think I need to do a lot more of that. This first year was like drinking through a fire hose for us. There was not the time to do all that individual kind of discussion. Now we can. We've got a whole year worth of information and learning and planning, and we're ready to do some of that. So we'll do a lot more of that one-on-one conversations before we get into the dais, so that we can, they can ask me any questions that they need to one-on-one.
Gotcha. Another question from the chat. BGR says the sheriff's funding should come from the city and not a separate millage. Do you think the city is responsible for coming up with whatever funds you need instead of going for another millage?
When I was the police monitor, we had to move to get independence of funding. And we did that for a reason, because whoever controls the purse strings controls the functions of the office. That's just how it is. So for instance, we have a need to fix what's wrong in this jail, which can cause death and injury to people. I can't afford it. I need the city to give me that money, but that's not been the priority. If it was my funds that I control, that would have been done over this last year, because this is what my deputies have to deal with on a daily basis. So I think independence is really key. There can still be oversight of this office, and we've got no issue with being upfront about everything that we spend and what we do, but only one person can be the sheriff.
Got it. One other question from the chat is, do you plan to use mediation as residents prepare to re-enter society?
Did we talk to Ramila about helping us?
No, because I just realized last week there's the family mediation group out in the community, and I came across them last week, and I was going to reach out to them to see if we could start having conversations with them. Our difficulty is because we are a pre-trial detention centre, you can't predict who's actually going to go back out in the community, because they go to court and they're either found guilty or not guilty, and they come back to us, and then they go back for sentencing so they can be incarcerated or put on a community-based order. So all of that happens in real time. So I'm still trying to figure out, how do we catch people as soon as they know what's happening in terms of their situation. But I did realize there was the family mediation program, which I think about a year ago somebody had mentioned to me, and I just remembered last week. So we'll have to make contact with them.
Yeah,
Right,
and that's
that was-
a big part of our reentry program with the grant that we got from the congressman. We want to make sure the majority of that goes to our community providing resources, and that's one of the resources.
And another question, I know I said that was the last one, I got two more. Can the sheriff cite examples of having used restorative processes with prisoners in jail as a way? How do you use, can you, I'm not sure I even understand what the restorative process is. What is that? Help me. I've been using that like I know, sitting here saying, yeah, restorative process. What the heck is that? And can you give us some examples of it, please?
And I'll turn that over to Dr. Birgden. I'm not a doctor either, but we want wellness of the person. And part of that is making sure that they understand what they've done, sometimes understanding who they've hurt. You know, we deal with both the residents who've perpetrated the crimes and the victims and survivors of those crimes. I would love to be able to do something really special with that, but
yes, I'm aware of that program in Australia. When I ran a drug treatment prison, there was restorative justice going on in the big house next door. That was like 1,000 people. So where the victims and their families came to meet with the perpetrator. Is that what the question's about? That process?
It doesn't say, and I don't know, you know.
The
process is being used, or the DA claimed that he was going to start as a way to do things in the city. And I think that if you, restorative justice is a way of sort of, it's a kind of mediation, I guess, in this instance. Betty, can you help me out?
I can't, but Troy was on the call. Troy can.
So
and actually, Sheriff and Doctor, I would love to have a conversation with you all, because it's going to take more than 30 seconds to talk about what restorative justice is. But essentially, it really looks at bringing people together in a voluntary way to look at what has happened, the impact of what has happened, and then how to repair the harm that was done to the extent possible. It can be done as reentry, but it could also be done, as you were alluding to earlier, as a way when people have grievances or other incidences of harm within the jail. Right now, Travis Hill, we train all of the staff at Travis Hill in restorative justice. And so I'm 100% confident that they know what it is and how to use it well. And we would love to provide the same kind of possibility for the other staff at the jail.
Yeah, and that's why we wanted to do, because they said they were starting the restorative circles actually in the pod, because we're putting all the students in one pod. And that's where I wanted to use that as the springboard for the rest of the jail. And at the moment, we're doing more just a straight traditional mediation approach as part of the culture shift, because it's a really big culture shift organisationally, so that we just start the conversations going between staff and residents. And my plan is the next step to make it more restorative, which includes looking at the whole disciplinary process, because it's two parts. There's grievances, then there's the disciplinary process. How do you repair the harm if you've engaged in some behaviour that's caused harm to another person? At the moment, you go off into the disciplinary pod, and we've got to be doing more than that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
you know,
it sounds like you're off to a good start. So I was really glad to hear that.
Yeah, and Troy, so good to hear all of you, and would love your help on that. But one thing we have done, which I thought was really effective, we had a group come in and talk about art and help with art. And they did spoken word and some written as well. And it was really amazing because the women talked, it was in the women, one of the pods. We have 2 pods for women. It was one of the pods. And they wrote their stories, and they talked about how they had failed their children, and they had, you know, hurt their families, and they didn't want their addictions to be all that their families knew about them. Really powerful, and we want to keep that going as well. So there's some good stuff out there our community can lead.
Well, I think we are just about at an hour since you joined us, Sheriff. Are there any other questions from the chat? Hearing none, see none. Brooke, Betty, any other questions we need to ask the sheriff? Can you tell us about yourself, Dr. Birgden? How long have you been here?
Okay.
You seem new on the scene.
I have actually been in and out of New Orleans for a decade, unbeknownst to most people. So I was here 3 months of the year for a 4-year period. I was involved in setting up the Citizen Police mediation program, the Community Police Mediation Program in the Independent Police Monitor's Office, which is why I'm familiar with the model. I've worked for 38 years in disability services, corrections, and the courts. So I've run a drug treatment prison in Sydney. I've run sex offender program treatment across a state. I set up 2 family violence courts. I'm involved a lot in the area of therapeutic jurisprudence, which is the law will have an impact on you whether you like it or not. So it might as well be positive or at least neutral, not negative. So that's one of my principles. People should not be worse off because they came here. And if anything, we should let them leave in a better state. And I'm published a lot in the area of offender rehabilitation and human rights. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. But I was here in 1992 watching Santana, thinking they were old. And then I was at Jazz Fest this year.
Now you see there earlier.
This time I wasn't standing on beer cans, so I didn't sink into the mud.
I got it. So are you the warden? I see your title is Chief of Corrections. Does that make you the warden?
Yeah, so I'm responsible, which is why I was on the phone for 5 hours Easter Sunday from midday till 5 p.m. because everything was going berserk. So yes, so I'm the Chief of Corrections.
You get the big bucks
In
for
Australia,
a
I'm a
reason.
forensic and clinical psychologist.
But we'll have to Google you and read some of your work. Well, Sheriff, I have to say, like I said before, this is what it's all about for me. You being accountable, you being accessible to the public. You have done that since you've been on the scene. I commend you and thank you for taking the time to spend with us here at Justice and Beyond. These are leaders of the community. Each one of them probably represents 50, 60 people. And they go back to their organizations. And so, you know, you're not just talking to them, you're helping inform the community. And so thank you. It was an excellent presentation. You answered the questions in a forthright manner. I just want to thank you for being here tonight.
Yes, Mr. Thomas. Mr. Thomas, we have a hand up by Miss Brooke.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see it. Thank you. Thank you, Brooke.
That's okay. I just wanted to find out from the participants if there's some way, some action that we as a whole group could be taking right now. Is there anything that besides being in a supportive role for you in your job, but how else are there specific actions that we could be taking now as a whole group?
Yeah, the Orleans Parish Prison Reform Coalition has kind of disappeared. I think that's been about a year since maybe they went down. Would love it if that some manner that could come back, because it can help me with this funding issue. It can help with this mental health jail that we really have to get a game plan together. Today we heard that costs are going to be $109 million to build that jail, and another 9 to 10 million to staff it every year.
Wow.
That if we have 109, and the city was talking about it's identified, I think, around $70 million from cutting community funding, and they're going to identify another 38 million that they're going to cut from community funding. If you've got money, we need to spend it on something that will help our community, not a jail. I'm gonna be probably the only sheriff in the world to say, don't help me build anything else.
That's right.
But I do not want that. So if we got to get something back to come together around this issue.
And you guys see the sheriff's put her email address, sheriff@opso.us. And you can, as a general, contact us at opso.us if you want to have further dialogue with the sheriff or some of her staff.
We also have a hand up by Miss Lane.
Thank you. Ms. Lane.
I'm sorry, I had to unmute. I don't know if he's willing to be put on the spot, and Danny, you're certainly welcome to demur, but I'd really like to hear what your thoughts are, Danny. And I'm speaking to Danny Engelberg, who's, I believe you are the public defender. You're head of the public defender's office in Orleans Parish. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I want to hear what your thoughts are in terms of, I mean, what do you think would be a couple of things that are on the top of your list for what you think should be changed, or the things that you think have been good changes or whatever. So I'm just tossing the ball to you.
Oh, well, thank you. I would love to come back with some of our folks and have a session. I'm a longtime member and participant of Justice and Beyond, and just have so appreciated this forum over the years. I jumped on today because today's my sheriff day, because the sheriff and I had a good meeting this morning. It was a good first check-in that we've done in a while, and it was really good to get to have a really quality discussion with you, Sheriff. So I appreciate you taking the time. And I just also, I think I've heard some of the same things we talked about, but also other things that really can help us move forward with our community. And I think I so much appreciate the language that the sheriff uses around that our issues around safety are really around public health issues, and that when we talk about them in terms of public health and a healthy city, and not separate that from safety, then we're in a better place. I also appreciate when the sheriff calls our clients residents rather than offenders. Most other sheriffs would not do that, and so I think the language matters, because our clients are more than just the number on their identity number in the jail. They're more than just a jumpsuit, and often they're very presumed innocent, and some are, and some are not even convicted of both the top offense or even any offense that they're accused of. There's really just two areas that I would say I would amplify from the sheriff. One is, I think she's 100% correct. We need the community to get back engaged in the jail issues. I think many of us thought, oh, sheriff was elected, done. In fact, that's where the work just begins. And so this issue about phase 3 is just one of many issues around the jail that I think the community can get re-engaged with. About, we know that if you build more beds, you fill them. And we also know that when Katrina hit, there were over 7,000 people sprawled in the campuses throughout the sheriff complex. about 4,000 of them were, either pretrial detainees or serving local parish time. The fact that have had no measurable difference or made our city less safe when that number is close to 1,000 is testament that we have a lot of people who've been in jail and continue to be in jail that pose no public safety threat. So I think, being mindful that we do not need to add more beds, and we need a new target number to get that number lower. I think the community needs to say the jail, even as it is today, which is drastically smaller than it was, 15, 17 years ago, needs to get smaller. Many of our clients are there that have nothing to do with public safety, have nothing to do with preventative public safety. And if we could, I think if I speak for the sheriff, that we're about 1,000, the number should be closer to 700 or under, 650 to 700. And we can do that with community support and everyone on this call, pushing back against the narrative of like, oh, the jail is just a revolving door. There's no consequences. There's a narrative out there that is, very much of the sort of mass incarceration narrative that is sort of creeping back up. And, every city, no matter where you are, is seeing a crime spike because of COVID and the disintegration of support services. And we're starting to see it level, get lower, and we're making progress. But to use that post-COVID spike as a way to bring back failed policies of mass incarceration is obviously a big mistake. So that's what I have to say. And I appreciate the opportunity, and would love to come back and bring our team to have a session with everyone.
Sounds great. Well, thank you. Yeah, and I think that's great. I think Brooke will be in touch with you to have that set up for next week. I'm speaking way out of turn, but I agree with you. I think it's important that we get all aspects of our criminal justice system in front of us so that we can understand a holistic approach is really the way to go to solve these problems. It's not just locking them up and throwing away the key. And I think you're so right. Every gubernatorial candidate, all they're talking about is locking them up and throwing away the key and stopping crime. And we know that is a failed policy. In fact, the same Republican legislature just recently defunded all of these jails because it costs too much money. I mean, they don't like that word defunded, and nor do I. But the point is, we redirected resources away from incarcerating people in our state. And I think one of the things we can do is invest in our people, invest in job training, invest in mental health, invest in the kinds of things that bring people to the facility in the first place.
And just to also, you brought up the legislature. I don't know if Sheriff, we never had a time to talk about this, but there's a bill going to the committee this Wednesday that would create a mandatory bail amount, right, which is also going to increase the numbers of the jail. And it's part of this, I think what Sheriff, you said, the empire striking back in terms of, anytime we make progress, there's always a step back and trying to fight against that progress we've made. And so I think just I wanted to highlight that's also coming down the pike, is this issue both in the state legislature and also locally about, how we think about pretrial detention. Are we pre-punishing people through pretrial detention, or are you innocent to proven guilty? I think there's plenty of punishment in our state of Louisiana that we don't necessarily need to pre-punish people based on simply an arrest or whatnot. So I think, being mindful of what's happening on the state, and we can report back. There's a whole bunch of, that's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of bills going through the legislature this spring that are focused on bringing back a lot of the, I think, failed policies of mass incarceration.
So Danny, one quick question for you. I know the DA's budget is, how much bigger is the DA's budget than the public defender's budget now?
Well, we've made significant progress on that and I think Justice Beyond was a big supporter to make it just to what we passed a parity ordinance. So now it's by law that that we have 85% of what the DA gets, because we represent 85% of of anyone in that courthouse. Often it's even more than that. However, there are two big differences that are not incorporating that, which I think does make for the disparity. There's the disparity on state funding. There's disparity on income that the DA gets based on fees that come from these people being processed through the system. And they also get a lot of in-kind support that the public defender office doesn't get, which drives turnover. For instance, they're in the pension system, we're not. They have their own building, we don't. They have city cars. We have to use our personal cars to do a lot of our office business. So there's a I would say it's better based on the courageous work of the council and the community drove to happen over the years. But we're still a long ways off. We're instead of fighting with two hands behind our back, we got one hand behind our back.
Well, that's better. And how long have you been chief public defender in the city now?
About a month.
Right.
Yeah, many of you guys know my predecessor, and I was his deputy, Derwin Bunton. He's been here at Justice and Beyond many years, and I was his. I worked closely with Derwin over the years for many.
Well, thank you for sharing with us today. Any other hands up, Valerie? Am I missing anyone?
No, I don't see anyone else. I don't see anyone else right now.
All right, well, go ahead.
Okay. As Just Beyond, we do thank everyone for joining us, especially our special guest and our guest moderator. Jeff, you always does a good job. We really appreciate you. We thank you for your community work as well. We thank the Sheriff Department. Sheriff, you are awesome. Keep up the good work, and Just Beyond will advocate for you. We will pick you up and uplift through your work, and we'll just send us information. We'll try to send it out to everyone because we're here to help you to make this a safer place. We do thank you. We thank your staff and everybody. We have a hand up with Miss Betty. Miss Betty?
Just a reminder, guys, if we're finished with this part, just a reminder that Louisiana Center for Children's Rights is asking for help for a bill coming before Senate Judiciary B tomorrow to have 17-year-olds permanently considered as adults in criminal court. And I put the email link for the Senate Judiciary B in the chat. They are also, I think the hearing's at 9 in the morning. They are looking for people to go to Baton Rouge. So if you happen to be going to Baton Rouge for something else, or you just would like to go, they are looking for people to pack the Senate room. We thought that we had all this settled in 2016, but now some of the conservative legislators, and there's a whole bunch of them up there, are trying to once again bring 17-year-olds. Danny may know more about this, but I put the email in. If you will email when we get off the phone and say you are against Senate Bill 208, raise the age, that's all you got to say.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Eddie, it's I think it's House Bill.
Oh, I'm sorry, House Bill.
That's right.
Thank you, Lane. House Bill 208.
Thank you. Again, we appreciate everybody being a participant today. And also, will you please share this with your network, with your social media, before we can spread this information out? It's very important. And now Betty had opened up the door for announcements. Do anybody have any announcements? Any announcements? No announcements. So we will pass this to, I want to say Jeff. Jeff, we're going to close out. Again, we appreciate our guest speakers, our guest moderator. We thank you. Please look forward for our next forum in our Facebook page and also in our email. If you haven't put your email in the chat, please put your email in the chat for Brooke and add you on to our email list. We thank you, we appreciate you, and keep up the good work, Sheriff, and your staff. We appreciate your hard work and your commitment to the New Orleans Parish. Thank you so very much. We're gonna ask Mr. Jeff, will he close us out with a prayer, please?
Absolutely. So thank you, love, for bringing us all together here tonight. It was a great, informative session, and we want to thank everybody for their participation. Thank you for giving us good ears and good minds to listen and to hear and to go out and spread the word of goodness to all of our communities.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. You have a good night.
Good night.
Thanks all. Thank you, Jeff. It was great.
Thank you. Bye. Good night.